The throne room floated above the clouds like a dream made real. Crystal walls stretched toward purple skies, and the floor beneath Jake's boots felt like walking on solid light. He had never seen anything like it in his 34 years of life. Earth had beautiful buildings, sure, but this place belonged in a fantasy novel. Jake pulled at the collar of his dress uniform and wished he was back on his ship. The Resolute was small, old, and smelled like recycled air, but it was home. This palace made him nervous. Everything here cost more than his annual salary. One wrong move and he might break something priceless. Ambassador Garrison stood beside him, perfectly calm in her diplomatic robes. She had been doing this for 30 years. Jake had been a military officer for 12, and most of that time was spent in space, not at fancy ceremonies. Thousands of aliens filled the massive room. Jake recognized maybe 10 different species. Some looked like giant lizards covered in jewels. Others glowed with their own light. A few reminded him of insects the size of horses. They all wore elaborate clothing and watched the center of the room with intense focus. The center held the reason everyone came. The throne of eternity sat on a raised platform, and it looked older than time itself. Dark metal that might have been black or might have been every color at once twisted into a seat that hurt to look at directly. Strange symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly with blue light. Prince Zethran approached the throne now. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, covered in black scales that reflected the light like polished stone. 4 red eyes blazed in his face, and when he moved, everyone in the room seemed to hold their breath. This was the future king of 12,000 star systems. This was the most powerful being Jake would ever see in person. Jake felt very small suddenly. Humans had only joined this galactic empire 40 years ago. They were newcomers, barely noticed by the great powers. Earth sent representatives to ceremonies like this because it was polite, not because anyone cared what humans thought. A being made of pure light floated above the throne. High Arbiter Velthus, the religious leader who would perform the coronation. Its voice echoed through the room without using sound, speaking directly into minds. The ceremony has begun. Prince Zethran of House Calvareth will now receive the blessing of the eternal void. He will become sovereign of all known space. Witness and rejoice, Zethran knelt before the throne. His massive form somehow looked graceful as he bowed his head. Velthus raised its arms and light poured down from nowhere. It wrapped around Zethran like a cocoon, growing brighter and brighter until Jake had to look away. Something went wrong. The light turned angry red. Zethran screamed, a sound so terrible that Jake's hands moved to cover his ears before he could think. The prince collapsed, smoke rising from his scales. The throne blazed with energy that looked completely out of control. Chaos exploded through the room. Aliens rushed in every direction. Guards ran forward but stopped, afraid to approach the unstable throne. Velthus flickered like a dying light bulb, its form breaking apart and reforming over and over. Jake saw the problem immediately. His engineering training kicked in without conscious thought. The throne was not just some fancy chair. It was technology, ancient and powerful, and right now it was overloading. Energy crackled through the air, building toward what looked like an explosion. If that thing exploded, everyone in this room would die. Maybe everyone in the city. The energy readings were off every chart Jake could imagine. He ran forward. Ambassador Garrison shouted his name, but he did not stop. Someone had to do something. These aliens were all standing around like statues, too shocked or too scared to move. But Jake had fixed failing reactors before. He had stabilized dying power cores on damaged ships. This was just another emergency. Just another technical problem that needed solving right now. His hand touched the throne's armrest. Cold metal, burning hot, both at once. Energy surged up his arm and into his chest. Jake gasped as pain and something else flooded through his body. The symbols on the throne blazed brighter, but the wild, chaotic energy began to smooth out. It flowed in patterns now, connecting to something deep inside him. The throne lifted him into the air. Jake tried to let go, but his hand would not move. Light surrounded him, the same light that had burned Zethran, but it felt different now. It felt like recognition, like a key finding its lock after thousands of years of searching. Symbols appeared on Jake's skin, glowing blue and silver. They crawled up his arms, across his chest, even onto his face. He could feel them writing themselves into his very bones. The throne was changing him, marking him, claiming him. Then it stopped. The light faded. Jake dropped back to his feet, stumbling. His whole body felt strange, like he had just been taken apart and put back together slightly wrong. But he was alive. The throne sat quiet now, no longer threatening to explode. Silence filled the room like a physical weight. Thousands of aliens stared at him. Jake stared back, confused and terrified. What had just happened? Veltus reformed completely, its light steady again. It looked at Jake for a long moment, and when it spoke, its voice carried disbelief. The throne has chosen. A new sovereign stands before us. The coronation is complete. No, Jake thought. That could not be right. He was nobody. Just a human ship captain who had acted without thinking. He looked down at his hands, at the glowing marks still visible on his skin, and felt his world turning upside down. Prince Zethran slowly stood. His scales were burned and cracked, and all 4 eyes focused on Jake with pure hatred. The look promised death. The look promised revenge, but Zethran said nothing. He just turned and walked away, his supporters following in shocked silence. Ambassador Garrison reached Jake's side. Her face was pale. She grabbed his arm and spoke in a whisper only he could hear. What have you done? We need to leave. Right now. Before they decide to kill you. But guards were already moving to surround them. Not hostile yet, but clearly not letting them leave either. One of them, a massive creature with too many arms, spoke in broken English. You come. Sovereign quarters. Protection needed. Protection or prison, Jake wondered. He looked at the throne one more time. It sat quiet and dark now, like it had always been just a simple chair. But he could still feel it somehow, a presence at the edge of his thoughts. A connection he did not understand and definitely did not want. Billions of beings across the galaxy had watched this ceremony through broadcasts and data streams. They had all just seen a human, a member of one of the weakest species in the Empire, become their king. Jake tried to imagine what came next and could not. Nothing in his training had prepared him for this. Nothing in his life made sense anymore. He was a soldier, not a ruler. He fixed engines and commanded a small crew. He did not know the first thing about running an empire. The guards began moving him toward a side exit. Ambassador Garrison followed, already talking rapidly into her communication device. Jake caught words like crisis and emergency evacuation and immediate contact with Earth. As they left the throne room, Jake glanced back one final time. The throne sat empty on its platform, waiting. And somehow he knew it would not stay empty for long. It had chosen him for a reason. He just wished he knew what that reason was. Outside the palace, the city stretched forever under alien stars. Somewhere out there, 12,000 worlds were learning that their empire had just changed in ways nobody could predict. And at the center of it all was one very confused human who just wanted to go home. But home was very far away now. And Jake had a feeling he would not see it again for a very long time. The sovereign quarters were bigger than Jake's entire ship. Rooms stretched in every direction, filled with furniture shaped for bodies that were not human. The bed looked like it belonged to someone 3 times his size. Windows showed the city below, millions of lights glowing in the darkness. Jake sat on the edge of the giant bed and put his head in his hands. 3 hours since the ceremony. 3 hours since his life went completely insane. The symbols on his skin had faded, but he could still feel them like scars that went deeper than flesh. Ambassador Garrison paced back and forth across the room. She had been making calls nonstop, talking to Earth officials and other human representatives. Her face looked older than it had this morning. They want you dead, she said finally. Not everyone, but enough. The major powers are meeting right now to discuss options. Some want to declare the ceremony invalid. Others want to simply remove you by force. Can they do that? Jake asked. The ambassador stopped pacing. I do not know. This has never happened before. The throne has always chosen members of the royal bloodline. Always. You are the first outsider in recorded history. Jake stood and walked to the window. Far below he could see crowds gathering. Some carried signs he could not read. Others were chanting something that did not sound friendly. I need to leave, he said. Get back to my ship and go home. This is not my problem. A voice spoke from behind them, calm and ancient. I am afraid that is impossible now. Jake spun around. A woman stood in the doorway. She looked human, maybe 40 years old, with dark hair and eyes that seemed much older than her face. She wore simple gray robes and moved like someone who had all the time in the world. Who are you? Garrison demanded. How did you get past the guards? The woman smiled. I am called the Oracle. I have been keeper of the throne's secrets for longer than your species has had space travel. The guards let me pass because they know I serve only the throne, not any empire or ruler. She walked to Jake and studied him carefully. Her eyes focused on the places where the symbols had been. The marks are permanent, she said. You cannot see them now, but they are written into your very existence. The throne is bonded with you. If you die, it destabilizes. If you try to reject it, the same thing happens. What does destabilize mean? Jake asked. Though he suspected he already knew the answer. The Oracle moved to the window and looked out at the city. The throne is not just a chair. It is a stabilization device, maintaining gravitational fields across the entire galactic core. If it fails, the effects would be catastrophic. Millions of worlds would experience gravitational anomalies. Billions would die. Jake felt sick. So I am trapped. I either stay and pretend to be king, or I leave and kill billions of people. Great choices. The Oracle turned to face him. The throne chose you for a reason. It does not make mistakes. You possess something the previous candidates lacked. What could I possibly have that Prince Zethron does not? Jake asked. He was trained since birth to rule. I fix broken engines for a living. The Oracle smiled. That is precisely the point. When you saw the throne failing, you did not think about power or status. You saw a technical problem and tried to fix it. You acted to save lives without considering personal gain. That is what the throne values above all else. Before Jake could respond, alarms blared through the building. Red lights flashed in the hallway outside. Ambassador Garrison grabbed her communication device and listened for a moment, then looked at Jake with fear in her eyes. Armed forces are breaching the palace perimeter. Multiple entry points. They are coming for you. The door burst open and Lieutenant Nina Ortega rushed in, her uniform scorched and a weapon in her hands. Jake's second in command from the Resolute looked like she had been through a war in the last few hours. Sir, we have maybe 5 minutes before they reach this level. I brought a security team from our ship, but we are badly outnumbered. The Oracle remained perfectly calm. Take him to the throne room. It is the only place that cannot be breached by conventional force. They ran through corridors that seemed to twist in impossible directions. Nina and her team formed a protective circle around Jake, their weapons ready. Twice they encountered hostile forces, and both times brief firefights erupted. Jake had never felt more useless. Everyone around him was fighting while he just ran. The throne room doors were sealed, but they opened automatically as Jake approached. The throne sat exactly as he remembered, dark and waiting. They rushed inside, and the doors sealed behind them with a sound like thunder. Heavy impacts began hitting the doors immediately. Someone was using serious firepower outside, trying to break through. How long will those doors hold? Jake asked. Nina checked a scanning device. Maybe 10 minutes. Those are military-grade plasma cutters out there. The Oracle walked to the throne and gestured for Jake to approach. You need to understand what you have become. Touch the throne again. This time, do not fight the connection. Let it show you. Jake hesitated. Last time he touched that thing, it had turned his entire life upside down. But explosions were getting louder outside and options were running thin. He placed his hand on the armrest. Information flooded into his mind. Not words exactly, but pure understanding. He saw the throne's history, glimpses of previous rulers, and the true purpose of this device. It was ancient beyond imagination, built by a civilization that died millions of years ago. The precursors, the Oracle called them in his thoughts. They had created the throne as a defense system, not to rule but to protect, to unite different species against threats from beyond normal space. The current empire had corrupted that purpose, turning a tool of cooperation into a symbol of domination. Jake gasped and pulled his hand back. The visions faded, but the knowledge remained. He understood now why the throne rejected Zethron. The prince wanted power for its own sake. He saw subjects as possessions. The throne was designed to reject that kind of thinking. The doors began to glow red as plasma cutters burned through. They had maybe 2 minutes left. Can I use the throne to defend us? Jake asked the Oracle. She nodded. But be careful. The power is immense. If you lose control, you could destroy this entire building. Jake sat on the throne properly for the first time. Energy surged through him immediately. So much power that his body wanted to reject it. He focused on what he wanted: protection, a shield. Keep everyone in this room safe, the throne responded. Blue light exploded outward from where Jake sat, forming a dome over the entire room. The doors finally gave way and armed soldiers poured through, weapons firing. But every shot hit the shield and dissolved harmlessly. The leader of the attacking force removed his helmet. Jake recognized him from the ceremony. General Krivak, commander of the military forces loyal to the old dynasty. The massive reptilian warrior stared at the shield with something like respect. "Impressive," the general said. "But you cannot maintain that forever. You will tire eventually. And when you do, we will be waiting." Jake felt sweat running down his face. The general was right. The power flowing through him was incredible, but it was also exhausting. He could feel his strength draining by the second. This was not sustainable. The oracle spoke quietly beside him. "You have bought us time. That is enough for now. Help is coming." Jake wanted to ask what help could possibly arrive in time, but keeping the shield active took all his concentration. His vision started to blur. His hands shook. Just a little longer, he told himself. Just hold on a little longer. Outside the palace, ships were arriving in the atmosphere. Hundreds of them from dozens of different worlds. The news of what happened had spread across the galaxy, and reactions were mixed. But some saw opportunity in the chaos. Some saw a chance for real change, and some simply wanted to see what a human would do with ultimate power. Jake knew none of this. He just focused on surviving the next few minutes. One breath at a time. 1 second at a time. The throne had chosen him. Now he had to prove that choice was not a mistake, even if he had no idea how. 3 weeks passed. Jake woke up every morning hoping it was all a dream, and every morning the glowing symbols on his skin reminded him it was not. He had survived the assassination attempt barely. The help the oracle mentioned turned out to be diplomatic pressure from smaller species who saw Jake as their chance for change. General Krivak backed off, but only temporarily. His fleet waited at the edge of the star system, a constant threat hanging over everything. 4 major sectors of the Empire refused to acknowledge Jake as their ruler. Riots broke out on a dozen worlds. The galaxy was tearing itself apart. Jake spent his days in intense training with the Oracle. She taught him how to access the precursor archives, massive databases of ancient knowledge hidden beneath the palace. She also taught him to control the throne's power in small amounts, enough to protect himself without burning out. Today he sat in what passed for the throne room's office, staring at reports he barely understood. Ambassador Garrison sat across from him, explaining the political situation for what felt like the 100th time. "The Varanth Collective is sending an inquisitor," she said. "They want to investigate whether the throne truly chose you, or if some kind of deception occurred." "Can they tell the difference?" Jake asked. "The Varanth can taste lies in the air. Literally. If you are hiding something, she will know immediately." Jake rubbed his eyes tiredly. "Great. Another test I did not ask for. What happens if I fail?" Garrison did not answer, which was answer enough. Jake would be removed, probably killed, and the galaxy would slide into civil war. No pressure at all. Nina entered the room carrying a datapad. She looked excited, which was unusual these days. "Sir, you need to see this. We have been getting messages from frontier worlds. Thousands of them. They are supporting you." Jake took the pad and scrolled through the messages. They came from ordinary people on worlds he had never heard of. Farmers and factory workers and families just trying to survive. They talked about hope, about change, about finally having a ruler who might care about them instead of just taking their resources. The messages moved something in Jake. These people were counting on him. They believed he could make things better. He could not let them down, even if he had no idea what he was doing. The oracle appeared in the doorway as if summoned by his thoughts. She did that a lot, showing up exactly when he needed guidance. "The Inquisitor has arrived," she said. "She wishes to begin immediately." Inquisitor Scylla was unlike anything Jake had encountered. She stood 7 feet tall, her body covered in glossy black plates like an insect's shell, forearms folded precisely, and compound eyes reflected rainbow colors in the light. When she spoke, her voice clicked and hummed. "Commander Jake Dawson, I will ask questions. You will answer truthfully. Any deception will be immediately apparent to my senses." Jake nodded. "I have nothing to hide." The questioning lasted 3 hours. Scylla asked about his background, his intentions, his understanding of what had happened during the ceremony. Jake answered everything as honestly as he could. He admitted his confusion. He admitted his fear. He admitted he had no idea how to be a proper ruler. Finally, Scylla stood and walked a slow circle around him. Her compound eyes studied him from every angle. Then she turned to face the assembled witnesses, including Prince Zethran, who watched from the shadows. My investigation is complete. Commander Dawson speaks only truth. The throne chose him legitimately. There is no deception, no conspiracy. The selection was valid according to ancient protocols most of you have forgotten. Relief flooded through Jake, but Scylla was not finished. However, I must report an additional finding. The throne has only activated 5 times in 3 million years. Each previous activation occurred immediately before a galactic-scale catastrophe. The pattern is clear. Something terrible is approaching. Silence filled the room. Everyone stared at the Inquisitor, waiting for more explanation. She provided none, simply bowed and departed. Jake looked at the Oracle. Did you know about this? She nodded slowly. The throne is not a tool of governance. It is a weapon. A defense against something the precursors feared so much. They built this entire system to fight it. That threat is returning. That night, Jake made a decision. He called for a galaxy-wide broadcast. Every world with communication technology would receive his message. Ambassador Garrison argued against it, saying he was not ready, but Jake was done waiting. He stood before the cameras alone. No fancy robes or crown, just his uniform and the truth. My name is Jake Dawson. 3 weeks ago, I became your ruler by accident. I did not want this position. I am not qualified for it. But the throne chose me and I am stuck with it. So here is what I am going to do. He took a deep breath and continued. The old system is broken. It exists to take from the weak and give to the strong. That ends now. I am announcing immediate reforms. The tribute system that bleeds frontier worlds dry will be cut in half. Military occupation of peaceful systems will be reviewed and reduced. Laws that privilege certain species over others will be examined and changed. The broadcast room was silent. Jake knew he was breaking every rule, violating every tradition. He did not care. More importantly, I am opening the precursor archives to everyone. Every species, every world will have access to the ancient knowledge. No more secrets. No more hidden truths. If we are going to face what is coming, we face it together. He ended the broadcast and waited. The reaction came within minutes. Cheers from the frontier worlds, outrage from the powerful, death threats from dozens of sources, and something else. Questions. Millions of people asking what he meant by what is coming. Prince Zethran requested a private meeting the next day. Jake agreed, curious about what the former heir wanted. They met in a secure room with only the Oracle present. Zethran looked different than he had at the ceremony. His burned scales had healed, but his eyes held less arrogance and more pain. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. You are destroying everything my family built over 2,000 years. Every tradition, every law, every structure. Jake met his gaze. Your family built a system that oppresses billions of people. Maybe it needs to be destroyed. Zethran was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something Jake never expected. You are right. I was raised to believe our rule was divine destiny, that some beings are born superior. The throne showed me the truth when it rejected me. I sought power for its own sake. That is not leadership. Jake was not sure how to respond. Was this genuine or another trick? The Oracle spoke. He tells the truth. The rejection broke something in him, but also freed him. He sees clearly now. Zethran stood and approached Jake. I cannot support you publicly yet. Too many still see me as the rightful ruler, but I can provide intelligence. General Krivak is planning something. A final attempt to seize power before your reforms take effect. It will happen within a week. What kind of attempt? Jake asked. Full military assault. He has gathered enough ships to overwhelm the palace defenses. He believes with you dead and the throne unstable, the old order can be restored. He is wrong, but he will try anyway. Later that night, Jake stood on a balcony overlooking the city. Millions of lights stretched to the horizon. Each one represented lives that depended on the decisions he made. The weight of it threatened to crush him. Nina joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee from Earth. Real coffee, smuggled in from his ship. They drank in comfortable silence for a while. Do you think we can actually do this? Jake asked. Change an entire civilization? Nina smiled. You already have. The precursor archives went public 3 hours ago. People are finding out their history has been a lie for 2,000 years. Revolution is already starting on a dozen worlds. Jake was not sure if that was good news or terrifying news. Probably both. A communication alert interrupted them. Admiral Cole Bennett, commander of Earth's Defense Fleet, was requesting an urgent meeting. He had brought reinforcements. 50 human warships had just entered the system, ready to defend Jake whether he wanted them or not. The pieces were moving into position. Krivak's fleet on one side, human ships on the other, worlds choosing sides across the galaxy. And somewhere in the ancient archives, warnings about a threat that ended civilizations. The storm was coming, and Jake stood at the center of it all, wondering if he was strong enough to survive what came next. The precursor archives contained secrets that shook the galaxy to its core. Dr. Helen Vasquez, a human scientist who had studied ancient civilizations her entire life, could barely contain her excitement as she explored the vast databases. But her excitement turned to horror when she found the warnings. She burst into Jake's office at 3 a.m, waking him from the first decent sleep he had gotten in days. Her face was pale and her hands shook as she held up a datapad. "I know what is coming. I know why the throne activated. Jake, we are in serious trouble." Jake rubbed sleep from his eyes and took the pad. The information was presented in complex alien symbols, but his connection to the throne let him understand. His blood went cold as he read. The precursors called it the Devourer, an entity from outside normal space that fed on advanced civilizations. It appeared every few million years, drawn to regions where technological development reached a critical level. The galaxy was at that level now. "How long until it arrives?" Jake asked. Dr. Vasquez checked her calculations. "Based on the patterns in the archives, maybe 3 months, 4 at the most. And Jake, the precursors built a throne specifically to fight this thing. That is why it chose you. You are supposed to lead the defense." Jake wanted to laugh at the absurdity. He was supposed to save the galaxy from an extinction-level threat. Him, a ship captain who had never commanded anything larger than a frigate. This was beyond impossible. But he did not have time to panic. Alarms blared through the palace. General Krivak had launched his assault. His fleet entered the capital system in force, thousands of warships demanding Jake's immediate surrender. Nina coordinated defensive positions while Ambassador Garrison tried desperately to negotiate. But Krivak was done talking. His ships opened fire on the palace shields, and the building shook with each impact. Jake ran to the throne room with the Oracle and Dr. Vasquez following. Outside the palace, space erupted into battle. Admiral Bennett's human fleet engaged Krivak's forces, but they were badly outnumbered. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes, and Jake felt each death like a punch to the gut. He sat on the throne and reached for its power, but the Oracle stopped him. "Not yet. If you use the throne now to fight Krivak, you will not have strength left for the real enemy." "Then what do I do?" Jake demanded. "Just sit here and let them kill us?" The Oracle smiled. "You do what you do best. Tell the truth." Jake opened another galaxy-wide broadcast. Every ship in the system would receive it. Every world with communication. He spoke quickly, knowing he had minutes at best. "General Krivak, Prince Zethrin, all of you fighting over who should rule, stop, just stop and listen. The precursor archives have revealed the truth. There is something coming that will kill all of us if we do not stand together. It is called the Devourer, and it ended the most advanced civilization this galaxy ever knew." He shared the data Dr. Vasquez had found, broadcasting it to every ship. Images from the archives showed worlds consumed by spreading darkness. Entire solar systems simply erased from existence. The precursors had been far more advanced than any current species, and they had barely survived the first encounter. The throne was built to fight this threat. That is its only purpose, not to rule, not to conquer, but to unite us against something that sees all our differences as meaningless. To the Devourer, we are all just food. Draconeth, human, Varanth, it does not care. The fighting slowed. Not stopped, but hesitated. Commanders on both sides were seeing the data, understanding what it meant. Jake pressed his advantage. "I am not asking you to follow me. I am asking you to look at the real enemy. We have maybe 3 months to prepare. 3 months to do what the precursors barely managed. We can keep fighting each other and die separately, or we can fight together and maybe survive. Your choice." Silence stretched across the system. Then Admiral Bennett made the first move, ordering his ships to stand down. Other commanders followed slowly, reluctantly, but General Krivak did not. His flagship continued advancing on the palace, weapons charging. The Draconeth general's voice boomed across open channels. You lie, human. This is a trick to save yourself. The precursors are myth. Their technology is legend. I will not be fooled by desperate fabrication. Jake felt frustration and anger building. He had tried honesty. He had shared everything. What more could he do? Then the universe answered his question in the worst possible way. Every sensor in the system went crazy at once. Space itself was tearing open at the galaxy's edge. Millions of light years away, but still detectable. Something massive was forcing its way into normal reality. Something that bent light and twisted physics just by existing. The Devourer had arrived early. Dr. Vasquez stared at her instruments in disbelief. That is impossible. It should not be here for months. Something changed. Something accelerated its arrival. Images came through from automated probes near the breach point. What they showed defied description. The Devourer was not a ship or creature. It was a region of broken space-time, a wound in reality itself. Everything it touched simply ceased to exist. Stars winked out. Planets vanished mid-orbit. Space stations disappeared between 1 second and the next, and it was spreading. Fast. The edge of the galaxy would fall within weeks, the core within months. Nowhere would be safe. General Kravak's flagship stopped its advance. The general himself appeared on screen, his arrogance replaced by fear. What is that thing? That is the truth I was trying to tell you, Jake said quietly. That is what kills us all if we keep fighting each other. The throne room's doors opened and Prince Zethran entered. He looked at Jake, then at the images of the Devourer, then back to Jake. When he spoke, his voice held no hostility. Only grim determination. I know warfare. I was trained in strategy and tactics since childhood. You need that knowledge. Use me. Jake studied the former prince. Was this genuine? Could he trust someone who had wanted him dead weeks ago? The oracle touched his arm and nodded slightly. Zethran was telling the truth. Welcome to the team, Jake said. Over the next hours, representatives from hundreds of worlds flooded into the palace through communication channels. They all wanted information. They all wanted reassurance. They all wanted Jake to tell them what to do. The weight of it nearly crushed him, but he was not alone. Nina coordinated military responses. Ambassador Garrison handled diplomatic channels. Dr. Vasquez analyzed the archives for any information about precursor weapons. And Zethran, surprisingly, became Jake's closest advisor on strategy. The former prince knew things about galactic military operations that Jake had never considered. He knew which species had the best shipyards, which worlds produced the finest weapons, which commanders could be trusted. His knowledge was invaluable. Late that night, Jake and Zethran stood together looking at tactical displays. The Devourer's advance was marked in red, spreading like infection across the galaxy's edge. Why are you helping me? Jake asked. I took everything from you. Zethran was quiet for a moment. You took nothing. The throne rejected me because I deserved rejection. I spent my life preparing to rule, but I never once asked why I should rule. What purpose it served. You showed me that in one moment of crisis. You acted to save others without thinking about personal gain. That is leadership. I was just someone who wanted power. The Draconeth Prince touched the display showing the Devourer. Besides, none of our old conflicts matter if we all die. This thing does not care about bloodlines or traditions. It just consumes. If we want to survive, we survive together. Dr. Vasquez called them to her research station. She had found something critical in the archives. The precursors did not destroy the Devourer. They could not. Instead, they sealed it, trapping it in a dimensional prison using their entire civilization's combined consciousness as a lock. That is why they vanished, she explained. They sacrificed themselves completely. Every precursor merged their consciousness into the seal. The lock has been weakening for millions of years. Now it has failed. Can we rebuild the seal? Jake asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Dr. Vasquez nodded slowly. Yes, but it requires the same sacrifice. Someone must channel the unified consciousness of billions through the throne. That person will burn out completely. They will cease to exist scattered across the galaxy as part of the seal. Jake felt ice in his stomach, so the throne did not choose him to rule. It chose him to die. The oracle appeared beside him. There may be another way. The precursors faced this alone. Their civilization was unified but small compared to current galactic population. If billions volunteer to share the burden, the sacrifice might be distributed. Many would die, but not all. and not necessarily you. Jake looked at the spreading red on the tactical display, at the worlds already lost, at the billions who would die if they failed. He thought about Earth, about Nina, about all the people counting on him to find a solution. And he realized he had to try no matter the cost. Because that was what the throne had recognized in him, the willingness to sacrifice for others. It was time to prove that choice right. The Devourer crossed half the galaxy in 2 weeks. Entire sectors went dark as it advanced. Millions of refugees fled toward the core worlds, bringing stories of the darkness that consumed everything. Ships that got too close simply vanished. Weapons passed through it without effect. It was not matter or energy. It was absence. The ending of existence itself. Jake stood in the war room surrounded by holographic displays showing the approaching threat. Every species' best military minds had gathered here. Admirals and generals from 100 different worlds argued about strategies that all amounted to nothing. They could not fight something that did not follow physical laws. Dr. Vasquez had discovered more information in the archives. The throne could create a unified consciousness, linking every willing mind in the galaxy into a single weapon. The precursors had used this technique to seal the Devourer before, but the process required a focus point. Someone to channel all that combined will. That person would be destroyed by the power flowing through them. Jake had made his decision. He would be that focus point. The throne had chosen him, and now he understood why. Not because he was special, but because he was willing to do what needed to be done. The Oracle agreed with the plan, though tears ran down her ageless face when she did. Nina found him alone on a balcony that night. She did not say anything at first, just stood beside him looking at the stars. Finally, she spoke quietly. There has to be another way. We can find something else in the archives, some weapon or technology the precursors left behind. Jake shook his head. We have been through everything. This is the only option that works. Someone has to be the sacrifice. Better me than forcing it on someone else. Nina grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. Earth needs you. Humanity needs you. We just got a seat at the galactic table, and you are the reason why. If you die, we lose everything. Jake smiled sadly. If I do not do this, there will not be a table to sit at. The Devourer does not negotiate. It does not care about politics or power. It just ends everything. I would rather die stopping it than live knowing I could have tried. The plan was ready within 3 days. Jake would sit on the throne and open himself completely to its power. Every being in the galaxy who volunteered would link their consciousness to him. Their combined will would flow through Jake and into the seal, reinforcing the dimensional prison that held the Devourer. The math said it would work. The math also said Jake would not survive the process. Ambassador Garrison made one final broadcast to the entire galaxy. She explained what was needed. Billions would need to join the network voluntarily. They would feel everything Jake felt, share his thoughts, become part of something larger than themselves. And some of them would die too, burned out by the immense power flowing through the connection. The response shocked everyone. Within hours, trillions volunteered, not just from the core worlds, but from the frontier, from oppressed species who had never benefited from the old empire, from former enemies who set aside hatred to face extinction together. They understood what was at stake. The day of the attempt arrived. The Devourer was only weeks away from the core worlds now. This was their only chance. Jake sat on the throne wearing his old uniform, the one from his ship. If he was going to die, he wanted to die as himself, not dressed up in royal robes. The Oracle stood beside the throne. Nina and Ambassador Garrison watched from nearby. Dr. Vasquez monitored instruments that tracked the Devourer's position. And Zethron stood at the room's entrance, having appointed himself Jake's last line of defense against any final attacks. It is time, the Oracle said softly. Are you ready? Jake took a deep breath. No, but let us do it anyway. He placed both hands on the throne's armrests and opened himself to its power. Energy flooded into him immediately, more than he had ever channeled before. The connection expanded, reaching out across space to every volunteered consciousness. Jake felt billions of minds joining his own. human thoughts mixed with alien ones. He experienced 1,000 different perspectives at once. The pain was incredible. His body was not meant to handle this much power. He could feel himself starting to burn out, his consciousness fragmenting under the pressure, but he held on, focusing everything on the single goal: seal the breach. Stop the devourer. Save everyone. Then something unexpected happened. Another consciousness joined the network deliberately, taking on part of the burden. Prince Zethran had stepped forward and placed his hand on Jake's shoulder. The connection flowed through them both now, distributing the terrible weight. "What are you doing?" Jake managed to ask through the network. Zethran's thoughts came back clear and determined, proving I learned what leadership actually means. "We do this together." Others followed. The Oracle joined, then Dr. Vasquez, then thousands of military commanders who understood the cost. Millions of ordinary people who chose to share the sacrifice rather than force it all on one person. The network grew beyond anything the precursors had achieved. This was not one civilization giving everything. This was dozens of species choosing to stand together. The combined will of trillions focused through the throne like light through a lens. Jake could see everything now. The devourer's true nature, the dimensional prison, the weak points in the seal. He directed the power with precision, reinforcing the barriers one section at a time. The devourer fought back. It pressed against the forming seal, trying to force its way through. Reality buckled under the strain, but the unified consciousness held firm. Human determination combined with Draconeth strength, with luminary energy, manipulation, with the unique gifts of 100 other species. Together they were stronger than the sum of their parts. Hours passed, or maybe seconds. Time lost meaning in the network. Jake felt beings dying as the power burned them out. Zethran's consciousness flickered and faded, his final thought one of peace. The Oracle followed soon after, her ancient existence finally ending. Thousands more disappeared, their sacrifice holding the seal stable. But it was working. The devourer was being forced back. The breach was sealing. The darkness stopped advancing and began to shrink. Reality reasserted itself where the void had been. Stars reappeared. Space returned to normal. Jake felt his own consciousness fragmenting. He was dying. But the seal was almost complete. Just a little more. Just hold on a little longer. His thoughts, scattered like leaves in wind, spreading across the galaxy as he became part of the dimensional barrier itself. Then it was over. The devourer was sealed. The network collapsed. Jake fell from the throne, his body smoking and his mind barely holding together. Nina caught him before he hit the floor. Her face swam in and out of focus. "We did it," he whispered. "Is it done?" Nina nodded, tears streaming down her face. "It is done. The devourer is sealed. You saved everyone." Jake smiled weakly. "Good. That is good." He closed his eyes, and darkness took him. He woke 3 weeks later in a medical facility. His body was broken but healing. More importantly, his mind was still mostly intact. The doctors said it was a miracle. Jake thought it was because so many others had shared the burden. The sacrifice had been distributed across millions, and while many died, many more survived. Including him. The throne was dark and would remain that way for millions of years. Its purpose fulfilled, it would sleep until the next crisis. Jake was grateful. He never wanted to touch that thing again. The galaxy was forever changed. Prince Zethran was mourned as a hero. The Oracle's sacrifice became legend, and the unified consciousness had shown every species what cooperation could achieve. The old empire was gone, burned away like dead wood. Something new was growing in its place. Jake refused to remain as king. He insisted on elections, on representation, on building a system where power came from the people rather than ancient artifacts. Many resisted, but more supported him, especially those who had been part of the network. They had felt what unity could achieve. They wanted to build on that foundation. 6 months after the sealing, Jake stood in a very different throne room. The old palace had been abandoned. This new chamber was simple and functional, designed for debate rather than displays of power. Representatives from every species gathered here now, making decisions together. Jake served as first speaker, elected to a 5-year term with limits on how long he could hold office. He spent his days mediating disputes, coordinating reconstruction, and trying to build something better from the ashes of the old empire. It was exhausting work, but it was also the most meaningful thing he had ever done. Nina commanded the new Joint Defense Force, made up of ships from dozens of worlds. Ambassador Garrison led the reconciliation efforts, helping former enemies learn to work together. Dr. Vasquez supervised the Precursor Research Initiative, carefully studying ancient technology while making sure it benefited everyone. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, not through conquest, but through sacrifice. Jake had proven that humans could lead not because they were stronger or smarter, but because they understood the value of cooperation, because when things got desperate, they chose to help rather than flee. One evening, Jake stood alone on the balcony watching the sunset over the new capital city. It was not as grand as the old palace, but it was honest, real, built by people working together rather than slaves laboring under force. Nina found him there, bringing coffee from Earth. 5 years after the sealing, the galaxy barely resembled its former self. The old empire based on domination had crumbled completely. In its place grew a confederation of equals, messy and loud and democratic. Jake's term as first speaker was ending soon, and he looked forward to stepping down. He had done his part. Now it was time for someone else to lead. The new capital hummed with activity as Jake walked through its streets. Aliens from dozens of species moved freely, trading and talking and sometimes arguing. But they argued with words now, not weapons. Markets sold goods from 1,000 worlds. Children of different species played together in parks that 5 years ago would have been restricted to nobility only. Jake stopped at a memorial, built to honor those who died in the sealing. Prince Zethran's name was carved first, larger than the others. The former heir had spent his life preparing to rule, only to die learning what leadership truly meant. Jake visited the memorial often, talking to the stone as if Zethran could somehow hear. "You would be proud of what we built," Jake said quietly. "It is chaotic and inefficient and nothing like the order you were trained to create, but it is fair. People have a voice now. That matters more than efficiency." A small Draconith child approached the memorial, placing flowers at its base. His scales were the same black as Zethran's had been, perhaps a distant relative. The child looked up at Jake with wide red eyes. "Are you the human who saved everyone?" Jake knelt down to the child's level. "I am one of many who saved everyone. Prince Zethran here saved everyone too. So did millions of others. We all did it together." The child nodded seriously, then ran off to join his friends. Jake watched him go, smiling. A new generation was growing up in this changed galaxy. They would never know the oppression of the old empire. They would take freedom and equality for granted. That was exactly how it should be. Back at the assembly building, preparations were underway for the election of the next first speaker. 3 candidates had emerged, each from different species. The campaign had been fierce but peaceful. Jake found it refreshing. Power was being contested through ideas and debate, not military force. Ambassador Garrison found him in his office, reviewing final reports before his term ended. She looked older now, her hair completely silver, but her eyes remained sharp. She carried news from Earth. "The Council wants you to return home for a ceremony. They are renaming the Resolute the Dawson in your honor. Your old crew will be there." Jake felt a pang of homesickness. He had not seen Earth in 5 years, though he communicated with his family regularly. The thought of walking under blue skies again, breathing air that was not recycled, seeing oceans instead of void, all of it called to him. "I will go. After the new speaker is chosen. I want to see this through properly first." Garrison smiled. "You have done well, Jake, better than anyone expected. You took an impossible situation and turned it into something good. Earth is proud of you. I am proud of you." Jake looked down at his hands. The glowing symbols from the throne were long faded, but he could still feel their ghost sometimes. A reminder of what he had been, however briefly. A reminder of what he had sacrificed and what he had gained. "I just did what needed doing. Anyone in my position would have done the same. Garrison shook her head. No. Many would have run. Others would have grabbed power and kept it. You built something better and then prepared to walk away. That takes a special kind of strength. The election took place 3 days later. The entire galaxy watched as billions cast their votes. The process took hours as results came in from distant systems. Finally, a winner emerged. A representative from one of the frontier worlds. Someone who had lived under oppression and fought for freedom. Someone who understood the value of what they were building. Jake stood on stage during the inauguration ceremony. He wore his old military uniform, the same one he had worn the day the throne chose him. The symbols of office were simple now. Nothing like the grand crowns and robes of the old empire. A simple pendant representing unity. That was enough. He placed the pendant around the new speaker's neck and stepped back. The crowd erupted in cheers. Peaceful transition of power. Democracy in action. It was beautiful. That evening, Jake's closest friends gathered for a final dinner together. Nina was there, promoted to Supreme Commander of the Defense Coalition. Dr. Vasquez attended via hologram from a research station exploring precursor ruins. Ambassador Garrison sat at the head of the table, already planning her retirement. Others who had been there from the beginning filled the remaining seats. They shared stories and laughter, remembering the chaos of those early days. The assassination attempts and political disasters. The moments of terror and triumph. 5 years felt like a lifetime ago. They had all changed so much. Dr. Vasquez raised her glass in a toast. To those who did not make it. To Prince Zethran, who found redemption in sacrifice. To the Oracle, who guided us through the darkness. To the millions who gave everything so we could be here tonight. They drank in solemn silence. The weight of memory hung heavy. But it was a good weight. A reminder of what they fought for and why it mattered. Later, Jake stood alone in the old throne room one final time. The throne sat exactly as it had been left, dark and silent. It would remain that way for millions of years, waiting for the next crisis. Jake hoped that crisis would never come. But if it did, he trusted the throne would choose someone worthy. Someone who understood that true power came from service, not domination. He touched the armrest gently, feeling nothing. The connection was gone. He was just Jake Dawson again. A human, a former ship captain. Someone who had stumbled into history and somehow survived. It felt good to be ordinary again. The journey back to Earth took 2 weeks. Jake spent most of it sleeping, something he had barely done during his term as first speaker. When the ship finally entered Earth's atmosphere, he pressed his face against the window like a child, drinking in the sight of blue oceans and green continents. The ceremony for the ship renaming was held at the main spaceport. His old crew was there, older now but still familiar. They hugged him and slapped his back and told him he looked terrible. It was the warmest welcome he could imagine. The Resolute, now the Dawson, gleamed in the sunlight. Seeing his name on that hull brought tears to his eyes. This was real. This mattered, not because of any throne or crown, but because his crew remembered him. His friends honored him. His work had meant something. After the ceremony, Jake visited his family. His parents had aged, worry lines deep in their faces. They had watched everything from Earth, terrified every day that they would lose their son. Now they held him tight and refused to let go for long minutes. His father, a retired factory worker who had never traveled beyond Earth's moon, looked at Jake with wonder and pride. "You saved the galaxy. Our son saved everyone." "I still cannot believe it," Jake smiled. "I had a lot of help. Billions of people who believed we could work together. That is what saved everyone. Not me. Unity." That night, Jake sat on his childhood home's porch watching the stars. Somewhere up there, the galaxy continued spinning. Trillions of beings living their lives, making choices, building futures. The old empire was gone, transformed into something better. Not perfect, but improving. Growing. Learning. Nina called via communication link. She was back on duty, coordinating defense exercises with multiple species fleets. The cooperation continued even without Jake at the center. That was the best sign of all. "What are you going to do now?" she asked. "You could teach at the academy. Write your memoirs. Run for political office on Earth. You have options." Jake thought about it. He could do any of those things. But what he really wanted was simpler. "I think I will take some time off. See Earth properly. Maybe get a small ship and explore systems nobody has bothered mapping yet. Nothing dramatic. Just living, Nina laughed. You were accidentally crowned king of the galaxy and nearly died saving everyone. And now you want to go sightseeing? Jake grinned. Exactly. I have seen enough throne rooms and battlefields. Time to see what else is out there. They talked for another hour, catching up and making plans to meet again soon. When the call ended, Jake sat in comfortable silence. The galaxy stretched above him, infinite and full of possibility. Somewhere out there, the throne slept in its empty palace, power waiting to be claimed by the next crisis. But tonight, Jake was just a man sitting on a porch under familiar stars. No crown, no throne, no desperate battles, just peace. He had earned it. The galaxy had earned it. And tomorrow he would start living again, really living, not just surviving crisis after crisis. A galactic king was crowned once. But that king chose to become something better. A citizen, a friend, a reminder that power should serve, not rule. And in giving up the crown, he had accomplished more than any emperor ever could. He had shown the galaxy that leadership meant sacrifice, that strength meant service, and that sometimes the best ruler was the one willing to step down. The throne was empty. The empire was gone, and the galaxy was finally free. That was the legacy that mattered, not names carved in stone or ships bearing titles, just billions of beings living better lives because someone chose to help rather than rule. Jake looked up at the stars one more time, smiled, and went inside. Tomorrow would bring new adventures. But tonight he was home, and that was enough.